My son-in-law stood in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning and told me I had 30 days to find somewhere else to live. He said it the way you'd tell someone the dishwasher was broken. Matter of fact, like he'd already run the numbers, and the numbers didn't include me. I'm Hugh Mackenzie, 68 years old, retired high school shop teacher from Sudbury, Ontario. I've lived in this house on Larch Crescent since 1991. I bought it the year my wife, Colleen, was pregnant with our daughter. We painted every room together. We installed the back deck ourselves. 2 weekends in August, me with a bad sunburn and Colleen handing me screws and laughing at how much I was sweating. This house is not just a building. It carries 30 years of a life. My son-in-law's name is Preston. Preston Almeida. He works in commercial real estate in Toronto and has opinions about everything, especially about things that aren't his. He married my daughter, Yvette, 4 years ago. Nice wedding. Open bar. I gave a speech that made people cry in the good way. I thought we were going to be fine. I was wrong. The trouble started quietly, the way most trouble does. Little comments at family dinners. Hugh, have you thought about what you'd do if the furnace goes? That's a big bill for one person. Or, Sudbury's not exactly close to anything, is it? He'd say these things and then smile, and I'd let it pass because Yvette seemed happy, and I didn't want to be the father-in-law who starts problems. But Preston wasn't making small talk. He was laying groundwork. Colleen passed away 3 years ago. Ovarian cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the end. Yvette came home every weekend near the end, and I will never forget that. Never. But after Colleen was gone, Preston started seeing my house differently. I could feel it when they visited. He'd walk through the rooms with this appraising look, like he was calculating square footage in his head. You got 4 bedrooms here, Hugh. What are you doing with 4 bedrooms? Living, I said. He didn't laugh. 6 months ago, he started being direct. He and Yvette were expecting their first child in the spring. They needed more space than their condo in Midtown Toronto allowed. Sudbury was centrally located. His words, between Toronto and Yvette's aunt in North Bay. The schools were decent, and I was rattling around in a house too big for one retired man. You should be somewhere with support, he told me. You're not getting younger. I'm 68, I said. I still cross-country ski. He smiled the way you smile at someone who doesn't understand the situation. It's just practical, Hugh. You must see that. I told him I'd think about it. I had no intention of thinking about it. Then, 3 weeks ago, he called me on a Sunday evening. Yvette was on the line too, which I noticed. But she was quiet. Too quiet. We've been doing some research, Preston said. There are some really excellent retirement communities in the area. Pinecrest Village just opened a new wing. Independent living, your own unit, meal options, fitness center. It's actually very nice. Preston, hear me out. The timing works out well for everyone. You don't have to worry about the maintenance on the house anymore. You'd have people around you, and Yvette and I could have a proper home base for raising our family close to where she grew up. I waited a moment. Close to where she grew up. In her childhood home. Well, yes. There it was. What does Yvette think? I asked. Silence on the line. And then my daughter, the one I taught to drive in the Canadian Tire parking lot on Regent Street. The one I sat with through 3 rounds of anxiety medication adjustments when she was 22. The one whose name is tattooed somewhere in the grain of every wall of this house. She said, Dad, it might not be the worst idea to at least look at the options. That sentence cost me a night of sleep. Preston, feeling the wind in his sails, pushed harder after that call. He started texting me links to Pinecrest. He sent me a floor plan with a unit circled. He called my neighbor, Barb, I found this out later, and asked her to gently encourage me to consider the transition. I don't know what he said to Barb, but she came over one afternoon looking uncomfortable and asked me if I was okay, and I said yes, and she looked relieved. 2 weeks ago, on a Friday afternoon, Preston drove up from Toronto without warning. He had a folder. He sat at my kitchen table and opened it like we were closing a deal. I've spoken to a real estate lawyer, he said. We can structure this as a family transfer to minimize land transfer tax. Yvette and I take over the mortgage, There's what, 11 months left on it? 13, I said. Right. 13 months. Effectively nothing. We take over that, cover closing costs. You move into Pinecrest. Your CPP and OAS covers most of the monthly fees. And if there's a gap, we'd contribute. CPP and OAS. Canada Pension Plan and Old Age Security. He'd looked up my likely income. He'd done a financial analysis of my retirement. Without asking me. Without being invited to. You've put a lot of work into this, I said. Someone had to be practical. I looked at this man sitting at the table where Colleen and I had eaten 30 years of meals, where Yvette had done her homework, where we'd played cards on New Year's Eve every year because we're a family that plays cards on New Year's Eve. And I realized Preston didn't see any of that. He saw underutilized real estate. I'll think about it, I said. He nodded, satisfied, the way people nod when they believe they've won. After he left, I sat in the kitchen for a long time. Then I got up and went to the phone. Not to call a lawyer. Not yet. I called my old student, Vikram. Vikram Nair is 41 now. He came through my grade 10 and grade 12 shop class. Skinny kid, glasses, no father in the picture, lived with his mother and grandmother in a basement apartment on Elm Street. He could barely afford his safety glasses in grade 10. I bought him a second pair and never said a word about it. He showed up after school 3 times a week for 2 years to work on projects in my shop. We built a workbench together that I still use. When he graduated, I wrote him a reference letter for the Carpenters Union apprenticeship program. He's now a licensed general contractor with 3 crews working across northern Ontario. His company has a 3-year backlog. Last Christmas, he sent me a card with a photo of his kids and a handwritten note that said, "I build things because of you." "Vikram," I said, "I need to talk to someone. Something's happening with the house." The silence on the phone lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then, "When do you need me?" I told him not to come yet. I had some calls to make first. See, Preston had spent 3 months researching my finances and my house. What he hadn't done, what he couldn't do, because he didn't know to look, was pay any attention to the people I'd spent 35 years teaching. When you teach high school shop for 35 years in a mid-sized Canadian city, you teach everyone. Kids who go on to university, kids who don't, kids whose parents have money, kids who never had enough. I taught the children of the people who built this city, and I taught the people who would go on to build it themselves. You don't spend 35 years doing that without accumulating something that has nothing to do with money. I called my former student, Owen, who's now a licensed plumber, and owns a company with 20 employees. He did the main floor reno on the new Sudbury courthouse last year. I called Ingrid, who came to me as a quiet kid in 1998 who'd been held back a year and was convinced she was stupid. She went on to become a structural engineer. She works for the province now, infrastructure assessment, and she manages 7 people. I called my old colleague Dawn, who taught English for 30 years at the same school and now sits on the school board. I called my daughter's friend Petra, who grew up around the corner and is now a paralegal at a firm in Sudbury. I'd shoveled their walk for years when her father was sick. I called Alistair, who was one of the most difficult students I'd ever had, refused to follow instructions, argued constantly, failed my class the first time and retook it, and who used that same stubbornness to become one of the most successful HVAC business owners in northeastern Ontario. He called me every year on the last day of school, had done so for 22 years. I made the calls. I told each of them, briefly, what was happening. Every single one of them said a version of the same thing. Tell me what you need. That's when I started to understand what Preston had actually miscalculated. He thought I was alone in this house. He was right that the rooms were quieter than they used to be. He was right that I didn't need 4 bedrooms. But alone is not the same as without family. And Preston, who grew up in a neighborhood where you kept to yourself and hired professionals for everything, had never really understood that some people build their lives differently. Preston made his final move on a Tuesday in October. He and Yvette drove up together this time. He'd brought updated paperwork, a draft transfer agreement, a letter from Pinecrest confirming a unit was available. He'd booked a moving company for the 3rd Saturday of November. He laid it all out on my kitchen table. Yvette sat beside him, looking at her hands. I've given this a lot of thought, Preston said, and I think this is genuinely best for everyone. You get support, you get community, you stop worrying about a 30-year-old house. We get a family home for our child. It's actually a wonderful outcome. I looked at Yvette. Is this what you want? She looked up. Dad, I just want everyone to be okay. That wasn't an answer, and we both knew it. But Preston jumped back in. The moving company confirms Saturday, the 21st. We can come up the weekend before to help pack. Whatever doesn't fit in the Pinecrest unit, we store or donate. I've already contacted a donation service. Already contacted a donation service. For my belongings. Without asking me. You've donated things from this house, I said slowly, without talking to me first. I just made inquiries. I nodded. I folded my hands on the table. Preston, I said, I want to ask you something. When you say this house should stay in the family, what family do you mean? He blinked. Our family. Yvette's family. Yvette's family, I repeated. And who's in Yvette's family? Well, us. Our child on the way. You, obviously, in a supported setting. What about Vikram? Preston stopped. Who? Vikram Nair. He spent more afternoons in this kitchen than you have. What about Owen? What about Ingrid? What about the 40-odd people who've sat at this table over the years and called me Mr. Mackenzie, and later called me Hugh, and who still call me at Christmas? Yvette's eyes had gone wide. Preston set down his pen. Those are former students, Hugh. That's different. Different how? They're not family. I stood up. I'll tell you what, Preston. Let me make a phone call. I picked up my phone, right there at the table, and called Vikram. Put him on speaker. Vic, I've got my son-in-law here. He's explaining to me that you're not family. Vikram's response, to his credit, was calm. Mr. Mackenzie, do you need me to come up this weekend or next? This weekend? I think. Done. I'll bring Owen. He's been asking how you're doing. I ended the call. Preston was staring at me. Hugh, I don't understand what you think is going to happen here. Something similar to what happened the last time someone underestimated how many people care about this house, I said. Get some sleep, Preston. Saturday's going to be educational. He left in a worse mood than he'd arrived. Yvette lingered at the door. Dad, what are you doing? I'm protecting something that matters, I said, which is what I've always done. I'd have hoped you'd be doing it with me. She left. I stood at the window and watched their car pull away from Larch Crescent, and then I went to the phone and started making calls in earnest. Over the next 3 days, my modest split level on Larch Crescent became a coordination center for something I hadn't planned and couldn't have predicted. Bikram drove up Thursday evening with his truck and his partner, Stephanie. Owen called from his company van on Friday morning to say he was 40 minutes out, and did I need anything from Tim Hortons. Ingrid took a personal day and drove from Sudbury South End. Petra came straight from her office, still in work clothes, and sat at my kitchen table with a notepad asking me very specific questions about what Preston had said, when, and in front of whom. Alistair showed up Friday night with a case of Canadian and a look on his face like he'd been waiting his whole adult life to do something like this. Dawn, my old English teacher colleague, brought his wife. She made soup. By Friday evening, 9 people were in my house, not because I'd asked them to stage some kind of demonstration. They came because they found out something was threatening a place that meant something to them, and they responded the only way people like that know how. They showed up. Petra sat with me that night and went through everything carefully. Preston has no legal standing, she said. None whatsoever. You own this property. The mortgage is in your name. He cannot compel you to sell, transfer, or vacate. If he continues to pressure you, that's a different conversation. I know that, I said. I know you know. I'm saying it because sometimes it helps to hear it clearly. She capped her pen. What do you want Saturday to look like? I thought about it. I want him to understand what he's dealing with, not in an aggressive way, just clearly. She nodded. Then let's make it clear. Saturday morning in Sudbury in October has its own quality of light. Cold, flat, honest. By 9 a.m., the street in front of my house looked like a contractor's trade show. Vikram's company truck. Owen's plumbing van. Alistair's HVAC service vehicle. Ingrid's province truck with the ministry logo on the door. Petra's sedan. Don's Subaru. 4 more vehicles from people who'd heard through the network and asked if they could come. My neighbor Barb, who understood now what Preston had tried to get her to do, stood on her porch with a coffee and watched with what I can only describe as quiet satisfaction. The moving truck arrived first, before Preston. The driver called the number on his work order, which was Preston's number. No answer. He climbed out and looked at the vehicles lining both sides of Larch Crescent and said, is there a Mitchell's Mackenzie residence? Mackenzie, I said. That's me. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding about today. Preston's Audi pulled up 10 minutes later. He sat in the car for almost a full minute before getting out. Yvette was with him. I watched her face as she took in what was in front of her, the trucks, the people on my front step, Vikram standing with his arms folded, looking like the world's most patient man, Ingrid in her Ministry of Transportation work jacket, Owen with his union cap, Petra with her notepad. Preston got out and looked at me. What is this? Vikram stepped forward before I could answer. Vikram Nair, he said. I went to school with Mr. Mackenzie for 4 years. He taught me a trade. Now I employ 63 people across northern Ontario. This is his house. Owen stepped up beside him. Owen Brzezinski. Same school, different year. Licensed plumber, 23 employees. This is his house. One by one, without drama, without raised voices, they said their names, what they did, and those 4 words. Ingrid. Alistair. Don. Petra. Badra. Betra. Betra. Petra. 4 others. Just names and facts, and this is his house. Preston stood on the sidewalk with his folder of paperwork and looked like a man watching the floor drop out of a plan he'd been building for months. I don't understand, he said finally. These are your students. They're my family, I said. The kind you build over 35 years. I know you don't understand the difference, Preston, but I'm hoping today helps. Yvette was crying. I hadn't expected that. She was standing by the car with one hand over her mouth, not looking at Preston, looking at me. I walked over to her. Dad, she said. I didn't know. I mean, I knew you had people, but I didn't realize. I know, sweetheart. I should have said something when he first started talking about the house. I should have told him no. Her voice broke on that last word. I'm sorry. Come inside, I said. Don's wife made soup. Barb's coming over. Let's sit down and talk like actual people. She nodded and let me walk her up the front steps. Behind us, I heard the moving truck driver asking Preston if he should reschedule. Preston's answer was too quiet to make out, but the truck left 20 minutes later. The next few weeks were complicated in the way that honest reckonings always are. Yvette and Preston had difficult conversations. Some of them I heard about, some of them I didn't. Petra quietly made it clear to Preston, through a letter that was professional and very specific, that any further attempts to pressure me regarding the property would carry legal consequences. He received it and did not respond, which I took as comprehension. What surprised me was Preston's father. He called me one evening, a man I'd met twice at the wedding and once at Christmas. Quiet man, retired electrician from Mississauga. He apologized on behalf of his family in the blunt and uncomfortable way of someone who doesn't make apologies easily. I don't know where he got this sense of entitlement, he said. It wasn't from us. I told him I appreciated the call, and I meant it. Yvette came up on her own the following Sunday. She walked through the house the way you walk through a place you're trying to remember properly, slowly, noticing things. She stopped in front of the wall in the hallway where Colleen and I had marked her height every birthday until she left for university. The pencil lines were still there. She stood in front of them for a long time. Preston didn't see any of this, she said finally. No, he just saw square footage. Yes. She turned around. She looked exhausted and young and sorry. I need to figure out some things, Dad. I know. I do want our child to know this house. I do. I should have told him that this wasn't his decision to make. That would have been good, I said. Not unkindly. Just honestly. She moved back in for 3 weeks while she and Preston went to counseling in Toronto. I didn't ask questions. I stocked the kitchen with the things she'd liked as a child. Orange juice, cheddar, that specific brand of crackers she still buys. And we watched television in the evenings and talked when she felt like talking and didn't when she didn't. It reminded me of the years when she was young and this house was full of noise and need and love. Preston came up at the end of the 3 weeks. He knocked on the door he'd always walked in before, and I let him in, and we sat in the kitchen. He didn't have a folder. I owe you an apology that I don't know how to make properly, he said. I convinced myself I was being practical, that I was thinking about Yvette, about the baby, about the future. But I think what I was actually doing was deciding that you didn't count, that you were finished somehow, and that was wrong. I let the silence sit for a moment. You tried to make decisions about my life without asking me what I wanted. Yes. And you tried to use my daughter to help you do it. He looked at the table. Yes. That's the part that's harder to forgive than the house business, I said. The house I can fight for, but watching Yvette sit at that table saying she just wanted everyone to be okay, when what she should have felt able to say was no, that's what I keep coming back to. I know, he said. I'm working on understanding that. I looked at this man who still had a lot to learn and who was, for the first time since I'd known him, being straight with me. I thought about all the kids who'd come through my shop over the years. The difficult ones, the ones who pushed back against everything and had to fail before they could learn. They were often the most interesting ones in the end. We'll see how the work goes, I said. That's all I can offer right now. He nodded. He didn't ask for more than that. Bikram came by the following weekend with his crew and fixed the section of back deck that had been rotting near the left railing. Wouldn't take a cent for it. He stood on the finished deck afterward drinking coffee and looking out at the backyard and said, "Still the best property on this street." "It's not the best property on this street," I said. "Barb's got better flower bits." "It's the best property on this street," he said again, and that was that. In March, my first grandchild was born. A girl. They named her Colleen, which I was not prepared for, and which meant I had to excuse myself to the hospital corridor for a few minutes to get it together. When I came back in, Yvette was holding her daughter and Preston was standing beside the bed, looking at both of them with a specific expression of a person who has recently learned what actually matters. He looked at me and said, "Hugh, thank you for not giving up on us." I looked at my granddaughter, brand new and already looking like she owned the place. "Family doesn't give up," I said. "It's the main thing about it. If you're watching this and you want to share, what does family mean to you? I'd like to know, because I've been thinking about it for 68 years, and I'm still learning. I've been thinking about what Preston actually believed when he walked into my kitchen with that folder. He believed that 68 years old meant finished, that a quiet house meant an empty life, that because I drove a sensible car and bought my clothes at Mark's and didn't talk about money at the dinner table, there wasn't much there worth accounting for. He looked at me and ran his calculations and came up with a number that was basically zero. That's a particular kind of mistake, not a cruel one necessarily. Preston isn't a cruel man. I've come to understand that. It's more of a lazy one. The mistake of assuming that what you can see is all there is. He saw a retired teacher in a split level on Larch Crescent. He didn't see 35 years of showing up for other people's kids. He didn't see what that accumulates into, over time, if you do it with any consistency and any honesty. I think about Vikram, standing in my driveway that Saturday morning, arms folded, calm as a lake. That kid came to me at 15 without a winter coat that fit properly. Now he employs 63 people. I didn't make that happen. He made that happen. But I was there when he needed someone to be there. And he remembered. That's the whole thing, really. That's the entire mechanism. You show up for people when it costs you something, and it goes somewhere. You don't know where. You don't keep score. But it goes somewhere. Preston kept score. He had a spreadsheet, basically, of who counted and who didn't. Biological versus chosen. Permanent versus temporary. Real family versus the other kind. The problem with that accounting system is it misses most of what actually holds a life together. The people who call you on a Tuesday for no reason. The ones who remember what you take in your coffee. The ones who drive 4 hours because something is wrong and they can't not come. What I keep returning to is Yvette standing in that hallway, looking at the pencil marks on the wall. All those birthdays recorded in graphite, her height at 5, at 8, at 11, at 14. Preston had walked past that wall a dozen times. He'd never once asked what it was. That's not a character flaw exactly. It's more of an orientation. Some people move through the world looking for what they can acquire, and some people move through it looking for what they can understand. Preston had spent so long in the first mode that he'd lost some facility with the second. The good news about that is it's not permanent. He knocked on my door without his folder. That matters. Whatever counseling he and Yvette were doing, whatever hard conversations happened in that Toronto apartment those weeks, something shifted. He came to my kitchen and sat down and didn't try to reframe or justify. He just said he was wrong. That takes something. It takes a kind of courage that doesn't come naturally to people who've spent their lives being right. I'm not finished being careful with him. Trust is rebuilt slowly, like a deck, board by board, and you have to check your work as you go. But I saw something in him that morning that I recognized from 35 years of teaching. The moment when someone stops defending themselves and starts actually looking at what they've done, that moment is the beginning of something. I've seen it turn into a great deal. My granddaughter's name is Colleen. She'll grow up knowing this house. She'll run on this deck that Vikram fixed. She'll be told stories about the woman whose name she carries. And someday, if I've done my job, she'll understand that the most important things you build in life aren't structures, they're relationships. They're the kind that hold when something tries to pull them apart. That's what I was protecting when I picked up the phone that Tuesday night. Not the house. The house is wood and drywall, and 30 years of memories soaked into the walls. What I was protecting was the truth of what those years actually meant. That showing up for people, consistently, without expectation, is the only investment that never loses its value. Preston understands that now, I think. He's learning it the way most of us learn the things that matter, the hard way, after we've made the mistake, in the long, uncomfortable work of making it right. I'm still learning it too. 68 years in, and I don't think you ever stop.